Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Hörst coming at you from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Yes, I am on lockdown. It's kind of mandatory in my part of the United States that we stay at home right now. And so it was a good opportunity to do the first episode of the Training Cafe. What is Training Cafe? Well, it's me in my house today with a cup of coffee in my cafe craft mug from Nuremberg, one of my favorite bouldering gyms, and hopefully you and a cup of coffee as well. Let's make this a ritual that we can go through a couple days a week, talk training, take some questions, hopefully from viewers in future episodes. I'm not sure I'll do that today because, this live streaming thing, this is an on-site climb for me. I've not done this before. And so kind of testing out the software. I'm hoping my Wi-Fi and the local internet holds up. Of course, bandwidth has been stretched to its limits here in recent days. Colleges are having remote classes, people working at home, people staying at home, binging on Netflix or whatnot. And so the internet is being stretched, at least here in the United States. And so I hope the signal's coming through clear. Hopefully the audio is clear. And based on your feedback from this episode and upcoming episodes, I'll hopefully be able to make things better, higher quality, the topics I cover, the things I do, and hopefully the Training Cafe will be something that you'll come to enjoy and that we can share together. Because, I consider you a friend of mine. I've been a climber for more than 40 years. I've been training and coaching people and writing about training for more than 30 years. And so talking about training is something I love to do. Drinking coffee is something I love to do. And so why not put it all together here in the Training Cafe? And so starting off here, it's Monday, March 30th, the first episode. And of course, we're in the midst of this horrible global pandemic. It is uncharted territory. It was kind of thrust upon us out of nowhere. We heard about it starting in China late last year, but I think it caught the rest of the world not by surprise, but I guess just the way it has stormed us here with international travel and the high rate of infection. It's extremely contagious, and you have to almost be frightened to go out and about right now for fear of catching COVID-19. And really, I guess the medical experts are saying that all of us will be exposed to it. Most of us will be exposed to it at some point. Many of us will shake it off and develop an immunity, although the weaker among us, the older, the people with pre-existing conditions, of course, they have a tougher time dealing with it. And of course, there's a higher fatality rate amongst folks like that. So we need to stay positive. We need to stay healthy. We as climbers will hopefully just have a little bump in our season here because of this, what is going on. But we will survive it. If you're watching this podcast or watching this video, you're going to survive it. It's the folks that aren't so healthy and aren't so strong and aren't so fortunate to have a good access to healthcare and such that are more likely to have some big problems with COVID-19. So I don't want to dwell on this so much, but it is something that we're all thinking about. We're all affected by. Here in Pennsylvania, we're just coming out of the winter season. If you live in the mid-latitudes of the Northern Hemisphere, and I imagine most of the people viewing this in Europe and the United States, that applies to you. It's been a long winter, and here in Pennsylvania, a wet winter, not good for outdoor climbing. And so I was really anticipating this season and having a good spring season, and that leading me into a nice summer season. And we got one rainy, cold trip into the Red River Gorge a few weeks ago, and then this whole thing hit, and we were kind of mandated to stay at home and go into lockdown mode. And so it's suddenly we're back to our winter training season again. At least that's how I feel with not being able to go outside and climb. And I know there's a lot of frustration amongst my climbing friends, and I'm sure you as well. The pro climbers, of course, who, this is their livelihood, is going outside and climbing. Or how about the Olympic climbers who qualified and now have to wait a whole nother year for the Olympics? That's a giant monkey wrench into their climbing. And recreational climbers who just climb indoors, well, the climbing gyms are closed in most spots around the world. And so we can't even do that. We're kind of prisoners at home. But if you're home, you're safe. And I guess that's kind of where we're at right now in most places, is staying home to do our part to slow the spread. And I am an optimist. I prefer to think positively and hopefully about things, and how we as humans, as global citizens, we're going to rise to this. We're going to win this war. I think the scientists and the medical professionals, the people that are working 24/7 on this crisis, are going to cover more territory in unlocking this thing and coming up with therapies and vaccines. They'll get more done, I predict, in the next 6 months than typically gets done in 6 years in the medical profession. And I, again, think positively that we will hopefully in a month or two have a return to some sense of normalcy. We'll see that peak in the infection and that peak in the fatalities. And it's going to rear its ugly head, I'm sure, on down the road. But I hope and pray we are back to some sense of normalcy. People back at work, climbers back climbing, and the healthcare workers getting some relief in terms of their duties that are around the clock at this point by summer. That is my hope. And hopefully as we get into fall and the next winter season, we'll have those vaccines coming online so that we can return to international travel and get back to our regular lives. But short term, we have to kind of batten down the hatches and lay low and do our part to get through this, keeping ourselves healthy so that we can also help the needy around us. And I have two elderly parents here in town in their upper 80s. So of course I'm concerned about them. I can't even see them face to face for fear of giving them something. I could be exposed, right? The nature of this thing is many people have it and don't even know it. And so for every one person that tests positive, I personally believe there's probably 10 people out there that are positive and have it as well, but haven't really developed significant systems or symptoms that they recognize that they have COVID-19, or at least think they are enough likely to have caught it to get even tested. And so I think the testing is, at least here in the United States, only done to people that are really sick and are kind of prime candidates to have COVID-19, and the rest of us don't get tested, at least not at this time. So, in China, they say they've had 84,000 infected. I bet it's in the millions. And I bet unfortunately, their fatality rate or statistics aren't accurate either, based on what's happened in Italy and in other countries where the numbers are probably more reliable. I think there's been some misreporting. But that's a whole nother topic. In any case, the stay-at-home orders apply to us. One thing I want to get into here in just a moment is training. What can we do to stay in shape at home? And by the way, if you hear any yelling coming from behind me or actually below me, okay, it's not a torture chamber. We have a home gym here. That's the business I'm in. And I have two kids who are climbers, and my wife and I train. And so the yelling or screaming, if you hear it, is my older son, Cameron. He's doing his strength power workout right now. And by the way, unfortunately, a tree trimmer just pulled up outside. I don't know how he's allowed to work given the stay-at-home orders, but he's out cutting trees down at my neighbor's house. And so if you hear chainsaws, that also is not part of the torture chamber, trust me. Okay, a bit of comic relief for just a moment. Okay, this is a video, 1-minute video, bear with me. And it's a little salty, the language, so forgive me if it offends you. Hopefully it won't, but I think it's humor and it's got a good message. So let me just show this to you here.
Thank you to Chris Franklin for these lyrics.
See if you can hopefully hear this through the screen.
The world has caught a virus, so I've written you a poem. We need your help to cure it, so stay the fuck at home. And if you have got 12 kids or you're living on your own, lock it down and isolate and stay the fuck at home. If you think you're not at risk here, you're living in a dome. It spreads faster than a hooker's leg, so stay the fuck at home. I need the gym, I need the beach, I hear you bitch and moan. You need to grow a brain cell and stay the fuck at home. But I feel fine, I don't feel sick.
That's me.
I'll go out on my own. How thick are you, you selfish prick? Please just stay the fuck at home. From LA through to Berlin, from Wuhan to Rome, there's people dying every day, so stay the fuck at home. If you need to contact family, use Facebook, Skype, or phone. We got the fucking internet, so stay the fuck at home. The only way to slow it down is isolate, not roam. Please help the world get back on track and stay the fuck at home. Stay the fuck at home. Stay the fuck at home. Don't you be a fucking dick. Please stay the fuck at home. Stay the fuck at home.
So that was a little salty for my taste, but I thought it was some good humor for the day. Let's call that the video of the week here on the Training Cafe podcast. So he said to stay the F at home. So let's stay the F at home and do some training. So let's talk about training here for a little bit. And so, as I said, myself, probably like many of you, have just spent a long winter training. And I guess if you're one of those cold weather boulderers, which I'm not with my poor circulation, but if you're one of those cold weather boulderers, then maybe you've just had your season. But for many of us who enjoy traveling in nice weather and milder conditions, for me, traveling here in the Eastern United States in the spring and traveling west in the summer, or perhaps going to Europe this summer or fall, those are the things I'm training for and looking forward to. My kids as well, and of course, millions of climbers around the world, and that is not happening right now. We need to stay home, and so training. Well, for many folks, they do their training at a commercial gym, which, again, most cases, and there's the tree trimmer outside. I apologize if you can hear that grinding occurring. It is not a bone saw. But where was I? So if you don't have access to a gym in your location, a commercial gym, then you need to find ways to get it done at home. Now, in the last couple of weeks, there's been countless videos on Instagram and elsewhere on train at home tactics. A lot of the pro climbers have been posting videos. A lot of the coaches have been posting videos and training ideas, and it's all good stuff. That's wonderful, and it's positive. It keeps us kind of motivated and forward thinking. And, exercise is a big part of keeping it together mentally when you're on lockdown like this, because I'm now on, I think today is day 14 at home. I've literally, not driven anywhere in the last 2 weeks. I've gone outside to exercise, but that is about it. And so I have a big time case of cabin fever, as they call it here. But thankfully, I do have a good home gym. I have a campus board and bouldering wall and a tread wall and a slew of free weights. So I got plenty to keep me busy at home, but not everybody is quite so fortunate. Now, hopefully you can get a hold of a hangboard, because that's fundamental to doing climbing specific training at home. And, from all the videos you've seen on the internet, there's a variety of exercises you can do with things that you have around the house and rubber bands and free weights. And I'm not going to get into nitty gritty specifics in this podcast, but what I want to do is present to you more a training philosophy or program that you might apply at home. And so I guess the first thing that I like to throw out there is do something physical every single day. If you are stuck at home, kind of spending 20 or 22 hours a day between sleep and kind of passive activities like being on your computer, watching the training cafe, or on your phone, you're not burning a lot of calories. You're not getting your heart rate up. You're not consuming much oxygen. You're not splitting much ATP. And those are all things that you want to be doing, not only for the training effect, but the after effects that are very good in terms of psychology, and just making you feel better and more positive and alive. And so doing something physical every day that gets you pumped, that gets your heart rate up, that gets you breathing heavily, I think that's huge. In fact, my advice is if you are someone that's at home working or just laying low at home and you have a lot of time to kill, well, I think you should be doing 2, maybe even 3 workouts a day. Now, they shouldn't be 3-hour workouts per day. That would be too much. So let me just give you a little bit of framework on what I'm thinking here, or what I'm going to recommend. When I say 2 a days, well, for me, one of those is an aerobic activity that I try to get outside to do. It could be just going for a walk for an hour and thinking and imagining and planning and goal setting and letting my mind wander and see what creative ideas might pop into my head. That's a beautiful thing about going for a walk or going for a run without your phone. Now, kind of that quiet time for your brain to calm down and your thoughts to wander is great. But I do go out for runs sometime with my phone and listen to podcasts and such. That's a good way to multitask and be, kind of time efficient, to learn and exercise at the same time. And so in any case, do something outdoors every day. I would say 1-hour walk or a 30-minute jog or hike or bike ride or something out. You can keep your social distance, but get outside and breathe some fresh air and soak up some sunshine. Those are all good things for us physically and mentally. And so that would be 1 workout a day. And then the other workout of the day should be something physically stressing, that loads your muscles and tendons, that gets you pumped. And so that, of course, needs to be something strength training oriented, with free weights or body weight exercises that you can do, push-ups, pull-ups. If you have a sling trainer, you can do various exercises that are strength training oriented that give you a muscular workout. And if you have a bouldering wall or a hangboard, you can do various training protocols to develop strength or strength endurance or power endurance. And so if you do 1 outdoor aerobic activity per day for 30 to 60 minutes, and then spend another hour later in the day doing your strength training exercises, there's your 2 workouts per day. And honestly, if you are a pro climber or an elite climber, that won't be enough to keep you in shape. You really do need to do the 3-a-day activity. So that could be like a morning strength workout, hangboarding or bouldering session. It could be an early afternoon walk or run outside, and then it could be a late afternoon or early evening power endurance session, again on the bouldering wall or on a hangboard doing repeaters. You don't want the 3 workouts to be the same. They should be different, distinctly different. So like a strength power climbing workout, then the aerobic generalized exercise activity outside, and then something that might be a little more endurance or strength endurance or power endurance oriented back inside using your various training tools that you have available to you. Now, you do have to modify this day over day. And so, again, what I'm doing and what I would recommend for many climbers to do is to do 2 days in a row that have climbing specific exercises. So you might do strength and power one day and more strength endurance and power endurance the next day. And of course, do your aerobic activity outside both days. And then on the 3rd day, give your climbing muscles a rest and do antagonist muscle training, rotator cuff, scapular stabilizers, all the pushing muscles. You could do some lower body exercises if that's something that you train. That would be your strength training workout on that 3rd day. And then day 4, 5, and 6, you could repeat days 1, 2, and 3. So, again, 2 climbing specific days and then an antagonist muscle training day, and then repeat that cycle of 3 again. And then the 7th day probably would be a good day to rest and maybe do no exercise other than going outside for your daily walk. Because I think that's got to be the one constant. You need to get out of your house and do some exercise and, get outside and into the fresh air. And so there in a nutshell would be what I recommend in terms of training. The tendency for some people might be just to take a few weeks off since they're at home and say, I don't have the tools to do it. But you will detrain over the course of 2 to 4 weeks if you do that. You will lose strength and power. That takes you 2 to 4 weeks to get back at least later this spring or summer. So you want to kind of slow the loss, and if anything, try to maintain what you gathered in terms of strength and physical gains during your winter training season. If you can maintain that during your time at home, that would be a great thing. And if you have a hangboard, to do different hangboard training protocols, in terms of your form strength, you can do it. Now, the one thing you can't really maintain very well at home is that route endurance. If you're a route climber, as I am, that's kind of my focus, my preference. That's a tough thing to maintain at home. Now, I'm lucky I have a treadwell, so we can simulate route training on the treadwell, but most people don't have access to that. And so if you're not out climbing on a rope outside or at a gym, you will lose that route fitness, and there's not so much you can do to prevent that to some degree. But again, I'm thinking positive that many of us will be back outside and climbing gyms will be open maybe in a month or two. That is my hope. And so that we can salvage our summer climbing season and have hopefully an even better fall climbing season. And for the competition climbers out there, the people in the World Cup circuit, I really feel for you, because as things stand now, they've canceled everything, I guess, up through Villars, the beginning of July. And I guess maybe some of those midsummer comps could be canceled as well, because how can you possibly, especially for route climbing, stay in shape to be able to compete? And not all the athletes, some countries might still have their athletes in the gym training while other countries do not. So it just doesn't seem like a fair situation heading into July competitions to bring athletes from different countries with who have had different access to training in the previous months due to the COVID-19 crisis. And so I kind of think that maybe those July competitions may be canceled as well. And this competition season will be really pared down. And maybe the best thing for most of us is just to be setting the goal to get back outside climbing again for some time this summer and into the fall climbing season. And so we need to keep our motivation up. We need to stay focused on goals and stay positive and stay grateful. If you're not sick, if you're if you're staying at home and you're healthy and strong, then you're better off than obviously the folks around the world that have come down with the virus and who are having big issues with that. And so again, short term, let's do our part and stay at home. Okay, so let's move on. And in future podcasts, I can get more into specifics of training and field questions. I don't think we're going to have time to do that here today, because my goal is to try to keep this at 30 minutes. That's my target, but I'm known to talk long. So maybe we'll go a bit over that. But in future podcasts, as I get more familiar with this live streaming thing and get feedback from you all, hopefully I can make this a better podcast, and you guys can help steer the shift in the direction of the Training Cafe. Moving on here. I wanted to share with you 6 tips for maintaining a strong immune system. And I actually posted a short article on my website, trainingforclimbing.com, last week that had these 6 tips. I'll just spend a minute on it here. Tip number 1, exercise daily. We just covered that. Exercise is helpful at keeping your immune system strong, and just getting outside is very important. And number 2, eat a nutritious diet. I'm a huge fan of nutrition. I think, training and nutrition are opposite sides of the same coin. And, to really optimize your training and get the most out of your training and to recover quickly so you can train again, it's nutrition and sleep habits are a big thing. And so the nutritious diet, consuming fruits and vegetables, you need vitamin C, obviously. Zinc is a very important mineral, as I understand it, especially for fighting viruses. So having extra zinc in your diet, eating those green leafy foods, or even supplementing with zinc might not be a bad idea. Vitamin D is also important for your immune system. Getting out in the sun helps, but even being in sunshine a few hours a day, most people are still vitamin D deficient. So I think I'd recommend I take supplemental vitamin D 200 IUs per day. Number 3, get outside. So you're going to do the exercise inside and outside every day, 2 workouts being the goal. Number 4, you also need to avoid overtraining. This is not a time to start training 8 hours a day because that actually can weaken your immune system and lead to that overtraining syndrome where your immune system is stressed and weakens. And then if you are subjected to COVID-19 in that state, as all of us probably will be at some point this year, you are more likely to come down with it and succumb. Number 5, adequate sleep. 8 to 10 hours a night, I think, is essential for hard training athletes, especially in this situation where you want to make sure that your immune system is staying strong. And finally, keep stress levels low. And, this is a stressful time. I know a lot of elite climbers and pro climbers are stressed out because they had big plans. I know 2 American pros who were over in Europe and had to fly home early from their trip. And this is their life. This is their livelihood, their career. And obviously there's countless pro climbers around the world in the same situation. And for recreational climbers, well, for many of you, climbing is the thing that gives you so much joy in your life. It gives me joy in my life. And so when you have that taken away from you, it can be depressing. And so anything we can do to stay positive, this is no time to eat yourself kind of out of depression or drink yourself out of depression. Those pleasure foods can be fine in small doses, but of course we want to maintain health and fitness as best as we can, and weight control is part of that. So, you put on a couple pounds or a kilogram over the next month while you're locked down at home, not a big deal. But if you put on more than that, then that's something that is obviously counterproductive in a strength to weight ratio sport such as climbing. So let's keep the stress levels low. Let's try to remain positive and hopeful and purposeful, having a long-term vision for your life and game plans for the coming months, the coming years, that you stay focused on instead of dwelling on what you're missing out on now, at this moment, this spring season, to be future oriented and taking tangible steps every day towards that future. That is one of those beautiful things that makes you feel good and stay positive and motivated. Okay, next thing I want to do, my next little feature here that perhaps I'll do every episode of the Training Cafe, is the shout out, the Training Cafe shout out to somebody who's done something extraordinary or has caught my attention. And in this case, it's Julia Chaudet, the French climber, who just did her first 5:15. The route was called Super Craconet. It's in France, and she spent 17 days working on it. I think she sent the route back on March 13th. I guess right before, kind of the lockdown began in France. And she's a incredible climber, only the 4th woman to climb that grade 5:15. Of course, Margot Hayes was the first. She's done 3 5:15As. Then Angie Eiter, the German climber, did a 15B. And Annika Verhoeven has done 15A, I think maybe 1 or 2 of them. And now Julia becomes the 4th female climber to climb the 5:15 grade. So that is worth a shout out. And I briefly met Julia 2 summers ago at a small steep crag in northern Italy called Tetta di Sare. It was the week of the Chamonix World Cup, and you can just kind of drive through the tunnel there into northern Italy. And there's this steep overhanging crag. It's kind of a training crag. And so we were there, and she came in and, kind of just hiked a handful of 5:14s. It was very impressive to see. Beautiful climber to watch, and a delightful person. And no doubt there's more to come from Julia in terms of hard climbing. And by the way, she's an Olympian. She qualified for the Olympics to represent France, which has now been delayed, as I understand it, to won't begin until late July of 2021 over in Tokyo. So that is the shout out. Question and answer as well. We won't go there this episode because I want to keep this bite size, hopefully, and not run on here. Do want a few thank yous. You know, I'm a veteran climber, been in the industry a long time. I have some companies that support what I do. La Sportiva is a big one. I've been with La Sportiva North America since 1990. So I've almost as long as I've been married. And DMM and Maxim Ropes, 3 companies that really back up what I've been doing. Of course, I have my own brands, Training for Climbing and PhysiVantage, which is the performance nutrition company that I started a year ago. I'll tell you more about that in a future podcast. I don't want to go off on that tangent right now, but if you want to learn more about performance nutrition, the importance of protein and other performance enhancing supplements that you can take, visit PhysiVantage.com. And I'm sure many of you have seen my books over the years. This might be a good time to read a book. And there's a lot of great training books out there. But my bestseller is Training for Climbing. There is Alex Megos on the cover. And this is the Spanish edition by Desnivel that hopefully climbers in Spanish speaking countries have access to. And, you know, my books have been translated into a variety of other languages, you know, Polish and French and even Farsi. And I understand there's maybe a Russian translation in the works and a Korean translation in the works. So hopefully those will come to fruition in coming months or years. And, you know, with the internet now, the books are less of a necessity. You can learn from coaches like myself online or in podcasts, but it's still nice to have a book to hold in your hand to crack open, kind of a reference manual with information that you can, you know, refer back to over time. And so, you know, still, I think it's nice for serious climbers to build a bookshelf of not only information books, but also inspirational books, those climbing photo books. I have a shelf full of them that has been built over the years because I love climbing. I love all things climbing. And so why wouldn't you want to have a bookshelf full of books? And so that's something that you can check out if you like. Wrapping things up here, because it looks like I'm at about 32 minutes. Again, I hope that this stream went off well and that my Wi-Fi and the broadband held up so that it was a decent quality broadcast. And I welcome you to provide feedback through the comments. I have a Twitter for Training for Climbing. I'm not a big Twitter person, but it is a good place for you to leave questions for future episodes. It's a Train for Climbing, TRAIN, the number 4 climbing is my Twitter handle. And then there's my Facebook and YouTube, the Training for Climbing channel. And you can find me on Instagram. I have a personal Instagram, Eric Hörst, and then I have my Training for Climbing Instagram, and then I have a PhysiVantage Instagram. So follow all 3 if you like. And we have some product giveaways on the PhysiVantage Instagram. If you want to sign up for that, you can win some free PhysiVantage nutritional products. And I guess that's about it. I see lots of comments here. I haven't had a chance to read through them. I need to learn how to multitask and talk and read these comments coming in at the same time. But that's something that I can work on and project in coming podcasts. Or I keep saying podcast because I do that podcast thing. But this is a live stream, so I don't want to get mixed up here. My podcast, if you go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and search Eric Hörst's Training for Climbing, you will find my podcast, which I do about 1 per month. But these, I'm thinking about doing 1 or 2 per week, at least as long as we're kind of locked down and, you know, at home. This is a way for us to get together and talk training and keep things hopefully positive and lighthearted, and for me to share my knowledge and hopefully inspire you a little bit, and for me to hear back from you guys and how to shape this show in the coming episodes. So with that, I guess it's time to sign off. I hope that you stay healthy and strong and positive and hopeful. And for today, I guess I will say Hörst out.